The Tennessee Titans are through the first week of the preseason, and position battles are heating up. I'll tell you who got closer to a roster spot and who got further away on today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. The Tennessee Titans roster battles are heating up. I'm going to do a little stock report after week one of the preseason, who got closer to securing a roster spot and who got further away. Also, at the end of the show, I'm going to do a little bit of a breakdown on the Tennessee Titans' new offense and talk about all the new things that we saw from Brian Callahan on Saturday night. Before I dive into all of that, thank you for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. You're not going to beat that anywhere else. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Titans podcast. Speaking of every day, shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. Couldn't do it without you guys. If you aren't an everydayer, you need to be one, especially this week. I'm going to be previewing joint practices with the Seattle Seahawks on tomorrow's show. Then I'm going to be breaking down practice on Wednesday night and Thursday night. I'm also going to have a preview of the second preseason game as a bonus episode on Friday. And then Saturday night after the game, I'll be live here breaking down all the action. So make sure you throw a thumbs up on the video, tighten up in the chat. With that being said, let's dive into our stock up. Here's the guys that I think got closer to making the Tennessee Titans roster with their performance on Saturday night against the San Francisco 49ers. And I got to start with Andrew Rupcich. Andrew Rupcich is the backup right guard right now, and I didn't have Andrew Rupcich as a guy who was on the 53-man roster when I initially did my 53-man roster projections before the training camp. But he looked fantastic at guard on Saturday night. And with Dillon Radunz being a guy who I like Dillon Radunz, I'm a believer in Dillon Radunz. That is well documented. But, I mean, the Titans worked in Andrew Rupcich at first team last week in practice. I don't think that Dillon Radunz has like an iron grip on the starting right guard spot. I do think that's the right way to go. But if Andrew Rupcich keeps performing, and again, Rupcich got a shout out from Brian Callahan on Sunday at the press conference. Rupcich is going into his third year with the Titans. He's a guy who does have the opportunity to compete for a starting spot. And I think besides the fact that the starting spot, I think he could compete for the roster spot at this point, it would be hard to not give Andrew Rupcich a roster spot when he is your best backup offensive lineman. I think Jerron Christian is a guy who's going to get a spot at tackle. I think Daniel Brunskill will get a spot as a backup center and a guy who can play guard if needed. And then Andrew Rupcich is your number one backup guard at left or at right guard. So I think right now that's my top 8 offensive linemen. And I think Andrew Rupcich did a really good job basically securing a roster spot with his performance. Again, he went up against the second string guys or the second team that came in for San Francisco in that game, but he was the Titans' best offensive lineman if you look at the totality of the performance. So got to give Andrew Rupcich his credit. Also got to talk about David Martin Robinson, the Titans tight end. Right now, he's basically the 5th string tight end if you want to put Thomas Odukoye ahead of him at tight end 4. But David Martin Robinson is intriguing. I mean, he's got great athletic ability. He had 2 catches for 30 yards. He looked really good with the ball in his hand. And I think that David Martin Robinson is a guy who, Brian Callahan has documented this. There are 2 different tight end roles in his offense. There's your HF tight end, which is your move tight end. And then there's your Y tight end, which is your traditional tight end role, you know, hand in the dirt next to the offensive lineman, all of that. David Martin Robinson has the size to play the traditional Y, but he also has the athleticism to be that FH role. So I think that David Martin Robinson, the undrafted free agent rookie tight end, had a fantastic performance, not only catching the football with the ball in his hands, but also blocking. I think he's a guy, if the Titans do keep, and again, the conversation here, think, would the Titans keep 7 wide receivers? For me, I would rather keep David Martin Robinson over a guy like Kyle Phillips. And I know that may sound crazy, but that's where I'm at right now. I would rather develop that young tight end and see what you can get out of him than have overlap with a player who doesn't give as much value on special teams. But we'll talk about Kyle Phillips when we talk about the stock down players. But David Martin Robinson is a guy I want to keep my eye on. And then, of course, we got to talk about those slot receivers and the returners that have their stock going up in Kearis Jackson and Jaquan Jackson. There are 4 slot receivers on this team: Kyle Phillips, Jaquan Jackson, Kearis Jackson, and Mason Kinsey. Look, Mason Kinsey, great for him. I hope he's on the practice squad. He's just not an NFL player, so he's not going to make this roster. That brings you down to the 3, Kyle Phillips, Jaquan Jackson, Kearis Jackson. At the end of the day, if you're going to be wide receiver 6 on this roster, you're going to have to provide special teams value. And not only did Jaquan Jackson and Kearis Jackson provide special teams value, they were phenomenal in both of their returns. We saw Kearis Jackson on the 63-yard kickoff return. We saw Jaquan Jackson on the 26-yard punt return. Like, both of those guys are better returners than Kyle Phillips. So I think that while they may be behind him on the depth chart, that special teams added value is going to bump them ahead. I would say a major stock up for Jaquan Jackson, and especially Kearis Jackson, who had kind of been an afterthought in my mind. I thought this is Kyle Phillips, or it's going to be Jaquan Jackson, the new rookie, because he was drafted by the team. But Kearis Jackson did some good things in kickoff return last year. So if he can continue doing those, maybe he can eke out a spot and win that role. Either way, it's stock up for both those guys. Do want to say Malik Willis. I don't think that Malik Willis' stock is up in the sense that he is going to take over for Mason Rudolph as backup quarterback. I think that people saying that are way overzealous right now with what we saw. But I think Malik did look improved enough. And, that great throw he had to Bryce Oliver was honestly the best throw of the night from any quarterback that played in the game, San Francisco or Tennessee Titans. It didn't count because of a pre-snap penalty and alignment penalty. But what a great throw by Malik. I think that Malik has improved. And I wasn't convinced that he would make the roster. I wasn't convinced the Titans would keep 3 quarterbacks, or at least keep him as the 3rd quarterback, but I feel a little bit better about that now. I would say that's stock up. Do want to hit a couple of guys on the defensive side of the ball, and I know people would be thinking Chance Campbell, but Chance Campbell was already a 2nd-string linebacker. He was the 3rd linebacker on the depth chart behind the 2 starters in Jack Gibbons and Kenneth Murray. So stock up for Chance Campbell, yes, but I don't really think this affected his place on the roster. I thought he was going to make the roster based on the unofficial depth chart that we saw. Do want to shout out Keandre Coburn on the defensive line. I think he helped himself. I think that he was on the fence whether he would make this roster. I feel pretty confident that he'll be that backup nose tackle. We knew that Keandre Coburn was close to Tavondre Sweat. They want him in Tavondre Sweat's ear, so that helps him out make this roster. But he looked like a guy who deserves it on Saturday night. And then finally, the 2 linebackers, James Williams, Otis Reese. I think with the way that the first unofficial depth chart came out, having Garrett Wallow and Chance Campbell ahead of those guys, I think seeing James Williams get praise from Brian Callahan, seeing the way that Otis Reese played as well, I think both of those guys with their play, I think they're getting closer to certifying a roster spot for them. With Garrett Wallow being out, you got Gibbons, you got Murray, you got Campbell. And then if you have Otis Reese, Cedric Gray, and James Williams, I think that's a pretty good 6 at the linebacker group. So stock up for those guys. But let's talk about stock down players who hurt themselves on Saturday. Before we do, though, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof kits, exhaust racks. I'm mixing up all the different items because they have so many. They got LED headlights and much, much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. A little Tennessee Titans stock report, looking at guys who helped themselves on Saturday night in terms of making a roster spot, looking at guys who maybe hurt themselves in terms of securing a roster spot. We're also going to talk about Brian Callahan's new offense. I want to take kind of a holistic look at what we saw from the offense on Saturday night. Before we get into the rest of the episode, do want to thank you again for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Also want to let you guys know that over on the Tic Tac Titans film channel, where I do all of my film work to go with this show, where we have all of our conversations, I did a breakdown on the Tennessee Titans offensive line, the first string offensive line, and their performance in the 2 scoring drives that they had. The link for that is going to be down in the description. I hope you guys would go check out that video. Put a lot of work into that late on Sunday night, so I hope everybody enjoys. And then I'm going to have a video on the Titans defensive pressure packages up on the channel on Tuesday. And then Wednesday, we're going to look at Andrew Rupcich. Thursday, probably going to take a look at Chance Campbell and maybe all the linebackers in general. But make sure that you guys check that out. Going into the stock down, all right. Number 1 on my list is Kyle Phillips. And we just talked about it a little bit when we talked about Jaquan Jackson, when we talked about Kearis Jackson. There's just no way around it. Look, Kyle Phillips had 3 catches for 18 yards. So not a bad performance from him by any means. But at the end of the day, the conversation becomes, what else can you do? Your wide receiver 6. The Titans have Ridley, Hopkins, Boyd, Burks, NWI. At most, any of these wide receivers that we're talking about are wide receiver 6. So when you're wide receiver 6, you better do something on special teams. You have to. You're not going to make the roster if all you can do is play slot wide receiver. And Kyle Phillips cannot do coverage teams. You know, he's 5'10", 190 pounds. He's not going to be out there making tackles on kickoff coverage and punt coverage and stuff. You're never going to ask him to do that. It's not that maybe he can't do it, but there's going to be plenty of people on your roster that are bigger, faster, stronger, that can do it better. You know what I mean? So if you're not going to be a part of the coverage teams, then you got to be a valuable returner. And Kyle Phillips, before the game on Saturday, dropped 2 back-to-back punts when he went out there with the punt returners. Whether it be the yips, whether it be he was never as good as we thought he was at it coming out of college, whatever the reason may be, he just simply is not going to be a starting returner for this team. And if Kyle Phillips is not a starting punt returner for this team or a starting kickoff returner for this team, he's not going to make the team. If he does, they would have to keep 7 players at wide receiver, the 5 that we mentioned earlier, and then Kyle Phillips and one of Jaquan Jackson or Kearis Jackson, which I think Jaquan Jackson has the upper hand, quite honestly. But again, I think that the Titans would be better served to keep 9 offensive linemen or 4 tight ends rather than 7 wide receivers. And if they only keep 6, Kyle Phillips isn't going to be one of them. That's just the reality. So his only hope to make the roster now is if they keep 7 wide receivers, which Brian Callahan may very well do. But again, I would prefer to keep an extra body at other places. So major stock down for Kyle Phillips, not only because he is struggling as a punt returner, but because we saw 2 highlight returns from his competition, and that makes it very tough. Trey Avery, he may end up making the roster anyway, just because outside of the top 4, I'm not in love with anybody at the end of the day. But man, I don't know how you could not put him in the stock down category. He just, whether it be starters, whether it be backups, he just doesn't seem to have it. And I saw after the first drive, Chris Harris, Titans defensive back coach, cornerback coach, is literally chewing him out on the sideline. Now, you know, he's coaching him. You know, it's not like he ripped his helmet off, spit in his face or some stuff, but he was getting on him about his performance on the first drive. And it looked like not heated, not intense, but Chris Harris was definitely trying to get his point across. Trey Avery just is not a good enough player, in my opinion, to have a guaranteed roster spot. And I think I could absolutely see after the top four of Snead, Cheeto, Roger, and Jarvis Brownlee Jr., I could absolutely see the Titans shaking it up on the back. And maybe even it's not Gabe Judy Lawley or it's not Eric Garrow or one of those guys. But maybe that's a place where the Titans look to take somebody off another roster, where the Titans look to pick up somebody in waivers when roster cuts start happening. I think cornerback, that last spot, cornerback 5 or cornerback 6, I think the Titans could look for some new blood there because I'm not overly impressed right now with anybody that the Titans have. And Trey Avery is obviously at the top of that list. Do also want to mention Rashad Weaver. Weaver played a lot of snaps in the game, and he got his hand up one time, and I don't know if he exactly deflected a pass, but he got in the way of the pass and basically messed up what it was supposed to be. But Weaver didn't get any pressure, didn't get a sack, didn't really factor into the game much at all. And when you think that coming into the training camp, we thought that would be the Titans' third rusher, he might even push Arden Key for a starting spot. That ain't happening. I think he's been moved down the depth chart by Shane Ray. I think Shane Ray is the third edge rusher. And with all the positive things that we've heard about Jalen Harrell, look, the Titans will probably keep 5 or 6 edge rushers, and Rashad Weaver is certain to be one of those. So maybe he didn't stock down in terms of his roster spot, but in terms of his pecking order at the outside linebacker position, I think it is a major stock down for Rashad Weaver. And, again, I think he does make the team. But just like we talked about before with the cornerback position, I wouldn't be entirely shocked if Rashad Weaver got cut and the Titans brought in a waiver claim from another position that may have a stronger edge rusher group. So just not what I wanted to see from Rashad Weaver in his 4th year. I thought he would take more steps and be a little bit more impactful. Jalen Duncan as well. I've talked about Jalen Duncan quite a bit with the offensive line discussions we've had over the last 2 days. Just not a good performance. Brian Callahan said there was some good, but a lot that needs to get better. I believe that was the quote. But yeah, just not looking good. And I'll be interested to see Leroy Watson is supposed to return to practice this week. And I'll be interesting to see whether Leroy Watson or Jalen Duncan get that first right tackle spot as the backup guy. And maybe John Ojukwu, they played Jalen Duncan over John Ojukwu, and everybody was acting like John Ojukwu was going to be a starter maybe, and, whatever. I never really bought into that hype. But we'll see. We'll see how those backup tackles, because I'm pretty certain Jerron Christian is the backup left tackle, and he's going to make this team. But that backup right tackle spot could be a 9th offensive lineman on the roster. That's a real battle right there. So I'll be watching for that. But stock down definitely for Jalen Duncan. And then finally, Julius Chestnut and Hassan Haskins. I'm giving a stock down for both of them. I don't think either of them are very impressive, quite honestly. Of course, you have Hassan Haskins, who's more versatile, better on special teams, which is more important for RB3 than anything else. He's a better pass blocker. Chestnut is a better runner. He did fumble. He's fumbled a little bit in training camp as well. So I'm just not overly impressed by Julius Chestnut or Hassan Haskins. That's why I really wanted the Titans to give Dylan Johnson a shot, and he barely survived 1 week of training camp. So I would say stock down for both those guys. I think the Titans, again, would look to maybe take somebody off someone else's roster and roster cuts for that, but I would give the advantage to Hassan Haskins if I had to. But let's talk about Brian Callahan's new offense. Before we do, though, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you aren't looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional with LinkedIn Jobs. 2.5 small businesses use LinkedIn for their hiring, and that tells you all you need to know. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Titans fans, let's cap off today's stock report for the Titans. Before we do want to thank you again for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Now for your second listen, go check out Locked On Fantasy Football. Look, it's that time of year. You're going to get daily insights, the best draft strategies, so you can win your league this season. Find the link to Locked On Fantasy Football down in the description, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, a reminder, over on the Tic Tac Titans film channel, I have an offensive line breakdown. You get a good look at this offense that we're talking about. A lot of you guys get in the comments and say, show us the videos. I wish you would show the videos while you're talking. Well, I can't for copyright reasons. So that's why I literally started a whole new YouTube channel just for the film. So I'm going to talk about what I saw from the offense holistically. But if you want to see some of that, then go check out the offensive line video that I posted, Tic Tac Titans, here on YouTube. Anyways, moving into the offense. The number one thing that stood out to me was the quick passing game. So much quick game. It really brought a tear to my eye. We saw like quick outs and flats. We saw slants and flats. We saw a drive concept with a quick drag route over the middle, the play that went to Calvin Ridley. Also, along with a lot of quick game, and what I mean when I say quick game is the quick passing game. So a lot of what the Titans wanted to do in previous years under Mike Vrabel was the heavy play action game. They wanted to do, play action fake, 7 guys in, 2 or 3 men out in the routes, give Will Levis a maximum pocket, give Tannehill a maximum pocket, and try to create separation based on the play action fake influence. Well, the problem is that the Titans' offensive line was so bad that even with max protection, there would still be pressure sometimes. And then also the Titans' wide receivers weren't quite skilled enough to consistently get open against, 5 or 6 defenders in the back end while there's only 3 people running routes. And one of those is usually like a quick flat route or the running back escaping after the play action fake. So that was how the Titans wanted to operate in the passing game. Mike Vrabel said it himself. They did not want to have a drop back passing game. Well, that's just not sustainable. You have to be able to, it's like when you watch the Titans on defense and these teams would just quick 5, 6, 7-yard gains on first down with a quick passing game. And it's like, why won't the Titans do this? That'll help the offensive line because it's getting the ball out quick. Now, the Titans needed more talented wide receivers to execute that system, which is why they went out and got Calvin Ridley and they brought in Tyler Boyd. And now they have wide receivers who can actually execute that. But seeing it in play and seeing Will Levis get rid of the ball so quickly and go through his progression so quickly, it's just nice to see. It's just a total change from what we had before. So that quick game passing, and let me just say this. This is a vanilla version of Callahan's offense. So we're going to get some of that play action stuff we saw in the open practice the Titans had last Saturday, not against the 49ers, but the Saturday before. Malik Willis had a couple of play action boots. I think the Titans are still going to have that in the offense, but they're not just going to be so dependent on that. They're going to have some quick game. Brian Callahan has said he wants to make sure that Will Levis has the answer for any question. So the Titans are going to have some play action, some PA boot, because Will Levis does that stuff well. But that's not going to be the only kind of early down passing that they're going to be able to do. They're going to have a little bit of quick game that they're going to be able to go to as well and have the personnel to actually execute that. They're going to have that shotgun passing game and so much run out of shotgun. So many runs out of shotgun. And again, the Titans could not properly do that last year because they needed to get the ball to Derrick Henry, and Derrick Henry isn't good out of shotgun. So, which honestly makes me a little curious about his fit in Baltimore because they do a lot of shotgun with Lamar Jackson. Only makes sense, but we will see. So, love the variety that we saw from the Titans over the last few weeks, but the quick game really showed itself against San Francisco, and I loved seeing that. Speaking of variety, the Titans have been a mostly zone run team the last few years. Over the 2 years of Todd Downing and then Tim Kelly, the 2 years of Todd Downing and then Tim Kelly, we saw the Titans try to incorporate more gap runs. So a zone run is where offensive linemen are basically blocking a zone. Think about those wide runs to Derrick Henry, where Taylor Lewan and Roger Saffold are like running out to the perimeter next to each other. That's zone, okay? Gap runs are more with like down blocks and pullers. So it's a totally different concept. And the Titans started working in more of those style of runs and getting away from just pure zone run, like when Arthur Smith was there. But the type of plays that they're going to be able to have this year within those styles is going to be different because they don't have Derrick Henry in the backfield, and they can run an inside zone out of shotgun with Tony Pollard or with Tajay Spears. We saw, and I showed it in my offensive line breakdown video on the Tic Tac Titans YouTube channel. You guys definitely got to go check that out. But the Titans ran like a double trap sweep, a pin pull sweep, and then they showed a similar look, but turned it into more of an off tackle run rather than an outside sweep. And they're just going to be able to do so many creative things with pullers and down blocks because they're going to be able to incorporate more gap runs because the running backs that they have are going to fit better in that system. So way more variety in the run game, much more variety in the passing game. They're going to throw it a lot more. They threw it a ton on Saturday night, so love seeing that. But again, the idea here is that you have the answers to every question on the test. And last year, when teams started bringing pressure downhill, when teams started crowding the line of scrimmage and playing tight man coverage, when teams started bringing pressure off both edges on early downs, the Titans did not have answers for how teams played them. So very excited to see what Brian Callahan does when the handcuffs come off and we get to the regular season. But even just what we saw in the vanilla version on Saturday night, very excited about this brand new offense from Brian Callahan and excited to break it down all year long. But with that being said, that is going to do it for me today, folks. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.